Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Big Game Hunters. I'm Mike.
And I'm Tom. Before we start today's episode, I want to make everyone aware that we're near the end of Season 2 of the Big Game Hunters, and we just launched a new Kickstarter to help fund Season 3. We really enjoy doing the show, but we need your help to keep it going. Today, we're going to take a look at Wits and Wagers, but first, we have Chit Chat.
In today's Chit Chat, we're going to be talking about perceived balance as compared to actual balance in games, and playtesting to discover these kind of idiosyncrasies. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Chit Chat. Today, we're going to be talking about playtesting and perceived balance versus actual balance. So, I've mentioned several times in the Chit Chats and, maybe in the reviews, how much I enjoyed our trip to Metatopia. Specifically, how much I enjoyed the two talks by James Ernest. I've referenced them a lot of times since then, and in fact, I think that I have enjoyed them kind of more since actually going, because he did such a nice job of succinctly explaining things that I kind of knew but couldn't quite put into concrete terms.
He gave you the words, and you've been using them.
I have. Shamelessly, in fact. Thank you, Mr. Ernest. But that said, I apologize, Mr. Ernest, but I don't like your games. I don't own any cheap-ass games. James Ernest is the head of cheap-ass games, and they just don't appeal to me. There's a lot of take-that games. There's a lot of really kind of light games. They're fine. I mean, they're just not my cup of tea.
Right.
So I had a kind of a similar experience recently where I got a great little, kind of tidbit or design insight from a designer whose game I did not like, and that's 51st State. So, and I'm going to butcher this, but I was directed to Ignacy Trevicek's design blog by another BGG user. And in it, he talks about designing 51st State and the really interesting process that he came up with it. So he started by just mocking up 30 cards with a red mark on the top, blue mark on the bottom, and a name in the middle. This will sound familiar to people who played the game. And he took them to his local equivalent of his local game store, and he sat down with a friend. And he said, "Oh, I have a brand new prototype, fresh from my brain. Let's sit down and play." So he deals 5 cards to each player, and his friend says, "Ignacy, these are blank. There's nothing here. I don't know what to do." And he's like, "Just imagine there's something there." He's like, "You have a petrol station. Like, what does your petrol station do?" He says, "You can assault it for a lot of fuel now. You can build a relationship with it for more fuel over time. You can kind of build an infrastructure using it. You can make it part of your tableau essentially. That's what your fuel station is going to do." He says, "I have a watchtower. My watchtower, let's say it prevents me from being attacked." His friends, there are attacks in this game? Well, not yet, but let's keep playing. What do you got? So I thought it was a great story. I hope I did it some justice here. And it was such a unique way, from my experience, to start a game design. He basically started it by playtesting. Every time I think of myself, and I think you do too, as we are kind of hobbyist designers, amateur designers, and we always think of playtesting as a method of refining a game, something that when we have a framework laid out, we show it to people. But he kind of did the exact opposite. He kind of just threw some Play-Doh together and built the game that way.
Yeah, I think that's a method of game design. It's a bold method. But I think it's like a more natural method. You'll see kids make games in the exact same way. And it can lead to really creative games, but like he surely did. I've never played 51st State, but at some point...
You're not missing anything.
At some point, he had to step back and refine those mechanics and turn it into a real game. But yeah, I think that's a good starting point, especially with someone you're comfortable with, a close friend. But in general, you're going to have like your idea that you bring to a table. And I think playtesting with strangers is probably going to be more beneficial to you than playtesting with your friends. Mainly because with strangers, they're going to tell you what they like and don't like immediately. But with friends, they're going to say, "Oh, it was a good game."
And I think that's where I get stuck sometimes in playtesting, because there's a point where I have something that I feel like I can show to my friends, but I don't want to show them every single iteration. I don't want to kind of inundate my friends with all these different versions of the game and just kind of exhaust my small group of playtesters who I know I can throw anything at.
Right.
So I feel like I don't start playtesting probably as soon as I should because of that. I want to have something nice and clean and ready to show before, so that they can find all the flaws that I haven't found yet. But
yeah,
that's
since Metatopia, which was in 2012, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, November 2012. Since then, I've been really getting into going to groups that were devoted to game design. That, like, you just bring your demo 1 week and it gets play tested. You get feedback, and then the next week you go back and play test someone else's. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good environment, not only for just like helping your game along, but also learning the process of game design, learning what kinds of questions need to be asked about, a question like what did you like or didn't like about the game is not as useful as what did this card work for you or did it not work for you?
Yeah, you want directed feedback.
Right. Mm-hmm. So yeah, places like that, public forums like that, I think are really great. If the longer you play board games, the more interested you're going to be in designing board games, and places like that are excellent for developing your playtest strategies.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think, what are some other things maybe that I think hold people back from playtesting, I guess? We have kind of a desire to hold on to it. Like I said, I don't want to exhaust my kind of playtester group.
I see it as sort of the same like barrier that we get with, that some people can get with like writer's block. You reach a certain point and you're just not sure where to go from there. Like you're happy, quote unquote happy, with everything you've got up to this point, but you're afraid that if you start changing things, it feels like you're taking a step backward. There's different strategies to overcome this. You can start removing things that seem like they might be complex, or paring down things. I like to call it removing the decimal points. Some people will get why that's funny.
It's not funny.
But
they served a purpose, Tom.
Making things simpler can sometimes help. But usually for me, when I find that hesitation of I just don't want to be playtesting this, it's usually because I'm at a point where I need to make changes to my game, and I'm just not sure how to do it. I'm not ready to do it, and so you just have to follow certain paths, whether it's paring down or removing elements, something like that.
When you talk about removing elements from the game, it reminded me, do you think you design more like a painter or a sculptor? So, for instance, when I write like a painter. I place very carefully things that I'm adding, and I don't try to put anything extraneous on. I think, I choose my words carefully as I'm typing them, and I don't have to go back and revise very much at the end. I think I also tend to design that way. I'm not as much of a sculptor where I just throw everything in the game and try to then pull things that don't fit anymore out. Yeah. I think I get hung up sometimes as a painter-style designer when I don't know what to add. I don't want to add something that's going to take me on a wrong path. I'm very afraid, I think, overly afraid probably, of putting something in or going in a direction that will lock me into something that I'm not completely satisfied with.
I tend to design and write, I guess, in elements, in like quadrants, if you will. So I'll start with an end goal. So if the game is to make a kaiju monster fighting game, that's my goal. Right. So there's got to be fighting in it, and there's got to be building, destroying in it, and then I'll start to think about
and monsters,
obviously. And so then I'll start to think about what mechanics are useful for those kinds of things, and then I would probably start. I started playtesting and found it had all those elements, but they weren't really coming together well. So then you start changing one or two of them to see what happens. And like I said, now I'm at the point where I need to make some changes, but I'm not sure what it is, so I've just sort of put it on the back shelf, work on some other things, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, let it kind of ruminate a bit. Yep. You know what? I think we're going to have to push the rest of this chit-chat to next week. We're going to have to talk about the differences between perceived balance versus actual balance in the next chit-chat, because we had so much to say about playtesting. For now, though, we're going to take a look at Wits and Wagers. Now I'm going to teach you how to play Wits and Wagers. Wits and Wagers is a party trivia game that doesn't require the players to know any trivia in order to compete. Before I begin, I should say that these rules aren't the rules that our playgroup uses. We've adopted the rules popularized by Will Wheaton on Tabletop. But first, I'm going to teach you how to play the game right out of the box. The goal of Wits and Wagers is to have the most points at the end of 7 questions. The game comes with a sand timer that counts 30 seconds. You'll use this both for writing down the guesses and for placing the bets. The game comes with a number of betting chips. The reds are worth 1 point, blues 5 points, and green 25 points. The game comes with pens and dry erase pads for the players to write down their guesses, and a number of wager chips, 2 for each player, that are used to place your bets on the different answers. And finally, and most crucially, the game has a deck of cards that have 7 questions on one face and the 7 corresponding answers on the other. The game is played out in 4 phases, with each player participating in each phase. Phase 1, the question reader, who will remain the same throughout the game, reads the first question on the card that's being used. In round 1, he'll read the first question on the card, and then in round 2, he'll change out the card for a new card, reading question 2 from that card, and repeating this process until you've gone through 7 questions from 7 different cards. The question reader will read the corresponding question, and then, once every player understands the question, each player will have 30 seconds on the timer in order to write down their guesses on their corresponding cards. Once they've done so, the guesses will be placed face down in the middle of the table, and when time runs out, if somebody hasn't written a guess, he doesn't get to. Once all guesses are down, they are sorted from smallest to largest. If 2 guesses are identical, they'll be placed in the same slot, for instance, these 2 8s. If there is an odd number of guesses, you will place them from the center with the middle guess in the center and out from there. The position of the guesses will tell you how much they're worth if they are the correct guess and they're bet on. For instance, the middle slot pays 2 to 1, and out from there 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1, and smaller than the smallest guess, which is always reserved, pays 6 to 1. If there are an even number of guesses, as seen here because 2 have been combined, then you do not use the center slot and simply work out from there. Once the guesses have been sorted, you will again have only 30 seconds to place your wagers. Each player will have 2 cardboard wager chips and will start with no other chips at the beginning of the game. You can place your wager chips however you like. You can bet on your own answer, or you can place bets on everybody or other players' answers. You can choose to split your wager chips or bet them on the same answer. If you have chips from previous rounds, you place them, if you like, under your wager chips. These will be bet in addition to the wager chip, which is essentially worth 1 point, but you will always get the wager chip back at the end of the round. Once the bets have been placed in 30 seconds, you can change your bets during that 30 seconds if you like. The question reader will reveal the answer, and then all the players will figure out who has been the closest. The goal of the game is to have the closest answer without going over. So, for this example question, in dollars, how much was each extra paid to run across the beach and scream in the movie Jaws? The answer is $64. In this case, the red player, who wrote 52, is the closest without going over. The gray player was technically closer, but since he went over, no dice. Once you determine the winner, then that answer is paid out, according to the odds on the slot. Since the red answer was in the 4 to 1 slot, every player who bet on it will get 4 chips for every 1 chip bet on that slot, including the wager chip. Then, all the other bets are removed, wager chips are given back, and you're ready to begin the next round. Again, the game is played over 7 questions, and at the end of that 7th question, the game ends and the player with the most chips wins Wits and Wagers. My playgroup wasn't crazy about Wits and Wagers right out of the box, but the version popularized by Will Wheaton on tabletop did appeal to us, so we've adopted his rules. In Will Wheaton's Wits and Wagers, the winner is the first player to reach 15 points. Rather than using these chips to place bets on answers, we simply use them to track score. In addition, you will not need the sand timer, so I put it away. In Will Wheaton's Wits and Wagers, the deck of question cards is passed around the table rather than having one reader for the entire round. The current reader will choose from one of the 7 questions and read it aloud. Then, each player will take as much time as they need to write down their answer on their board, and then they're all placed face down in the center of the table. Then you begin what's known as the doubling down round. This gives each player the opportunity, in order, going from the question reader, to double down on a particular answer. When you double down, you will take both of your wager tokens and place them still sight unseen on one of the face down answers. If that answer turns out to be the most correct, in other words, the answer that is the closest without going over, you'll get 2 points for each of your wager chips. You must place both in order to double down, so you'll get 4 points or 0. After every player has chosen to double down or not in turn order, then you reveal all the answers and place them from smallest to largest, just like in the regular game. At this point, the players go through another round of betting the same way they did in the doubling down round, except this time the wager chips can be split up and are each only worth 1 point if they're placed on the most correct answer. After that, the player who wrote the actual correct answer, or the most correct, again, closest without going over, will receive an additional bonus point. So, if you wrote the right answer and doubled down on it, you'll get a total of 5 points, 4 for doubling down and 1 for having written the correct answer. Once all the scores are tabulated, the chips are given out, and the question deck passes to the next player. He'll begin the next round of questioning the same way by choosing one of the 7 questions, and play continues until one player has 15 points. If 2 players reach this mark at the same time, you'll simply keep playing until there is a clear winner. That's how you play Will Wheaton's Wits and Wagers. Now that you know how to play both versions of Wits and Wagers, we're going to take a look at it in our point-counterpoint review.
Because Mike and I both prefer the Will Wheaton version of the game, that's what we're going to review. And because Mike and I agree about the Will Wheaton version of the game, I'm going to roll to see who argues for the game and who argues against. If it's even, I'll take the pros, and if it's odd, he will.
Again, I will tell everybody how much I enjoy games, and Tom will tell everybody
that Will Wheaton should shut his trap, but he shouldn't because I love you, Wheaton.
It's okay, he knows. So, the first thing I really love about this game is, unlike other trivia games, and I generally avoid other trivia games for this reason, you can play this with anybody. You can play this one. You can't play other trivia games with your niece or your grandma because you don't have overlapping knowledge bases. You can play them, but only one player is going to know the answer at any given time. You're not going to have enough shared knowledge in order to meaningfully play trivia with one another. But with this one, you can play it with anybody. Everybody enjoys this game. Everybody I play with seems to want to play it again right away. You can play this with family, friends, everybody.
I guess the first thing I have to say about it is that we do have to review the Will Wheaton version because we don't like the previous version. The real problem, there's 2 things to say. The real problem with it is that the way betting works, you get an early lead. If you're the first one to hit on the 4 or 5-to-1 payouts, you're just going to snowball. You have more money to risk, so you have more money to bet, so you're going to win first. That's really the way it works. The second problem really is that the rulebook itself, it has all the information on the first 2 pages. It seems like it has all the information on the first 2 pages, and then there's a couple pages of examples afterward. But there are still a few rules hidden in those examples. And if you don't read them, you're going to miss them. That's a con for me.
Yeah. And I'll note that for a 5-6 page rulebook, a full 2 pages are taken up by an advert. Not very classy, North Star. But that said, I continuing from the first point, it's a very inclusive trivia game. So not only can you play this with people who have a different knowledge base than you, but you can play this with people who don't like trivia. I don't like trivia games. I have a good friend who doesn't like trivia games. We both love this one because the answers are all numerical. You can kind of guesstimate them. A lot of them feel more like kind of logic problems, especially the percentage ones. Feel more like kind of logic problems than actual trivia. For instance, I once came across how many turkeys are eaten each year in the U.S. annually on Thanksgiving. And you can kind of math that one out a little bit. You can say, well, I know there's this many people in the U.S., I think about this many people would celebrate Thanksgiving. I think this many people would eat a single turkey. It's kind of more feels like logic than trivia. So I feel like everybody can get into this one. It's totally inclusive.
I guess the only real problem I could find with our favorite version of the game, the Will Wheaton version, is that betting is sort of a little wonky here too. If you manage to get an early lead, we played at 15 points. If you manage to get an early lead or other people manage to fall behind and miss points a few turns, if one person is out ahead, all you have to do is really just keep getting the minimum number of points each turn and you'll win. You don't have to take big risks, whereas the other players in the game, if they're behind, have to take those risks, and there's no guarantee they'll catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be kind of a negative play experience for those players if they have to basically double down on something every turn to have even a shot. Yeah. But, I do like the components of this one. I don't like the rule book, but I do really like the whiteboards. whiteboards. In other similar games like this, you will have a piece of paper instead of the whiteboard. I haven't really seen this one elsewhere other than in North Star's line. So I have to give them credit for that. And I think the whiteboards work really well. They're a little more colorful, a little more fun to look at.
Better for the environment?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, they're just a little more pleasant to use than paper. You don't have to worry about running out. I know in Wise and Otherwise, for instance, I'm kind of running out of sheets for it.
Yep.
So this one, I kind of like that.
You don't have to worry about running out of paper, but you have to worry about running out of marker. Because how many have we had run out, like, immediately?
In my copy, 2 already.
Yeah.
I haven't played it that much.
So that's sort of a con. I mean, dry erase markers, not that big a deal. You can get replacements. The real problem with the components, though, is this is your stack of trivia cards. It's just not that big for a trivia game. There are 7 questions on each card, but with a game like Wise and Otherwise, how big is your stack?
It's a whole tray.
Right.
Same with Trivial Pursuit. Yeah, you're right.
So you're just going to have limited replayability with this before you start seeing the same questions again and remembering the answers.
Yeah, it's true. But, if we can pull ourselves out of the counterpoint review, if you can tear yourself away from your miserly visage for a moment, Tom, then maybe we can talk about what we really think of the game.
Well, I can see a setting for either version of the rules. I can see a setting where you're, like, in college, you want to play poker, but you're nerds, so you want to play a nerdy version of poker.
That is a problem I often come. I want to play poker, but I'm a nerd.
Yes.
What can I do?
This is the exact kind of game that would be good for in either version, I think. And I'm exactly the kind of person who would enjoy that. I think the out-of-the-box version lends itself toward that more because it seems like you should be replacing the chips with money, because then you're not going to really run into the same kind of problem that you get. If you're walking away from the table with your winnings, you're not really running into the same problem that we mentioned where you win early, you win the game.
Right, because you're not going to want to risk the money.
Right,
that makes sense.
So anyway, but either version of the game, I think fun, in the right setting, going to be awesome. I do prefer the Will Wheaton version because it is more universal. I'll give it 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10? So I mostly agree with that. I think that, I've played more of the Will Wheaton version. I have given that one more of a fair shake. I do really like the way it plays. Every time I bring it out, people want to play it again. I don't think it's like potato chips. You can't play just one game of Wits and Wagers. So yeah, for that reason, I'm also gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I'm tempted to give it a higher score, but it's innovative, but it's still a party game. And I think the only reason it's not higher, 8 or 9, is this is a really small stack. I've already started to see repeat questions.
Yeah.
And that's not good for a trivia game. So the longevity is questionable at this point.
I would say you could just swap in trivia cards from another game, but all the answers have to be numbers.
Right. I mean, the format of the questions makes the game. Yeah. It totally drives the gameplay.
All right. That's our review of Wits and Wagers. Stay tuned for the breakdown. And now we have the breakdown of Wits and Wagers from North Star Games. Of special note is that we're reviewing the Will Wheaton version of the game and not the core game. Wits and Wagers plays in less than half an hour, so we give it 90 short and 10 long. It's also a very fast game. Everyone is playing at the same time, and it's pretty rare to wait for someone else to give an answer, so we give it 95 fast and 5 slow. We give it 5 luck because you might get a question card that doesn't have a question that you want to ask, but otherwise it's all skill at 95. Knowing trivia helps, but you really win by judging the best answer. We give it a perfect 100 in tactics. Either you're going to score every turn or you're not. It's a near even split for interaction and independence at 55-45. We give the edge to interaction because the factors that go into betting are highly interactive. We give it 100 abstraction because it is a party trivia game with absolutely no theme. We give it 100 simplicity because all you have to do is write an answer and place a bet and you know how to play the game. We give it 50-50 on portability and grandeur. You could condense the game into an extremely portable version, but that felt playmat is nice and it comes in an average sized box. We give it 70 expandability and 30 completeness. There's not too many cards in the game and you will eventually want more, but if you don't play party games often, it's easy to forget the answers. We give it 5 trophies for originality because it's a unique trivia game that doesn't really require you to know any trivia. We give it 3 trophies for value. There are some really good components, some kind of bad components, some components you may not use, but it's all in a very affordable box. Both Mike and Tom give it 7 out of 10, and that is the breakdown of Wits and Wagers.
We hope you enjoyed doubling down with us in Wits and Wagers. Next week in the Chit Chat, we're going to pick up where we left off this time by talking about actual balance versus perceived balance. And we're going to play Warriors, another game by a friend of the show, Mike Elliott.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for regular updates. See the links below for our Facebook and Twitter pages. Don't forget, we just started a Kickstarter, so see that link too and throw us some money. And leave us a comment on your thoughts on playtesting.
See you next week. I like how it shoots the memory cards out like, fuck you, memory cards.
Done with this shit.
Everything's rolling. Episode.
It's like a fucking frat boy in a beer can. Camera's like a frat boy in a beer can, Zoltan.